Are they really supposed to have, are they really supposed to have what there? Camels? I don't know, didn't you read up on it first? What? I should ask Rommel. He's never been in that part of the world. Okay. August 7th, 1942. In the Far East and South Pacific, it is the Japanese that have been making offensives again and again all year long. But this week finally begins an Allied invasion. This week begins Guadalcanal. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Allies continued their preparations for their impending campaign against the southern Solomon Islands, even as the Japanese advanced along the Kokoda Trail in New Guinea. In North Africa, Erwin Rommel tried and failed to defeat the Allies at El Alamein, and over in the Soviet Union, the 4th Panzer Army was diverted to the northeast to help the 6th Army, which had stalled in its drive towards Stalingrad. Wilhelm List's Army Group A, however, blasted off Operation Edelweiss and headed down into the Caucasus. At the very end of the week, Salsk fell, and with that, Semyon Budyonny's Soviet North Caucasus front was broken and in full retreat. Last week, Budyonny was ordered to combine the Southern and Northern Caucasian fronts into one command, still called the North Caucasian Front, but to split his forces into two, a Don Group under Rodion Malinovsky, which is the 51st, 37th, and 12th Armies, and a Coastal Group under Yakov Cherevichenko, the 18th, 56th, and 47th Armies, and the 1st Rifle and 17th Cavalry Corps, the former to guard Voroshilovsk and the latter Krasnodar. Further south is Ivan Tulenev's Transcaucasian Front, covering things down to the Turkish border and even the Iranian-Turkish border. Army Group A is advancing in 5 corps-sized groups. There are Soviet counterattacks, notably one supported by armored trains, which is stopped by the Luftwaffe, but the progress is pretty rapid, advancing on Voroshilovsk and Kropotkin, and both Red Army groups are pulled back to the Kuban, from which the Soviets are evacuating food and supplies, while all the industrial equipment at Maykop, Krasnodar, and Armavir is loaded on trucks and driven away. Voroshilovsk falls to the Panzer Spearheads III, Tikhoretsk falls to the Infantry the 4th. The 1st Panzer Army swings southwest to try to cut off the Soviet retreat, attacking towards Armavir and Maykop. The Axis force the Kuban on the 5th and 6th and take Armavir. This gives them a small refinery, the one that's on fire, and an airfield, which Luftwaffe advanced planes immediately occupied. It is 40 degrees Celsius outside, 104 Fahrenheit, and most of the attackers have never seen camels before. To the northeast, Joseph Stalin has decided to split the Stalingrad front in two, since it faces threats from both northwest and southwest on a front of over 600 kilometers. He has a conference the night of the 2nd, where Andrei Yeremenko says that they should adjust the boundaries of the new fronts so that all of Stalingrad city falls within one front. Stalin does not agree, and the boundary line between fronts runs along the line of the river Zaritsa and on to Kalach. Vasily Gordov commands the Stalingrad front and Yeremenko the southeastern front, and they and their staffs will now both be located in Stalingrad. 2 commands, 2 sets of forces to defend the same place. German spearheads have reached the River Don near Malo-Golubaya, splitting the defenders in 2. Gordov wants to counterattack with 21st Army, backed by 1st and 4th Tank Armies, to stop this penetration, which threatens 62nd Army's flanks. Anton Lopatin, who takes over command of the 62nd Army on the 3rd, asks if he can withdraw it, but Gordov says no and does the counterattack, with only 15 tanks in each tank army. So he's stopped pretty much before he's even begun. But still, until the 6th, Friedrich Paulus's German 6th Army is generally motionless, with 2 full Panzer Corps out of gas. He does use this respite to reinforce, so he can free up his armor to drive towards Kalach. So on the 7th, when he launches his renewed offensive, units reach Kalach's outskirts by nightfall. With a pincer movement and with units of the 4th Panzer Army to the southeast, much of Lopatin's force will be surrounded within 2 days in the Kalach pocket. But Gordov's front has lost more than half of the over 1,200 tanks it had back on July 22nd, and Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army was diverted from the Caucasus last week to assist now in the attack against Stalingrad. So the two sides here will be about equal in armor, which bodes ill for the Soviets since they were defeated before when they had a 5-to-1 armor advantage. Sixth Army has also been beefed up with 2 German and 1 Italian division. These reinforcements permitted Paulus to shift 4 fresh German infantry divisions eastward into the critical battle for the Great Bend. Hitler was convinced these reinforcements were more than sufficient to ensure safe passage of the Don and the quick conquest of Stalingrad. The 4th Panzers are to rapidly seize the southern suburbs of Stalingrad, and they are on the move. The 48th Panzer Corps, backed by the 4th Army Corps and the Romanian 6th Army Corps, some units making 40 kilometers on just August 1st. On the 2nd, the 14th Panzer Division captures Darganov, and on the 3rd, they take Zhutovo. When the 4th Panzers resume the advance on the 5th, they reach Abganarovo Station, just 70 kilometers southwest of Stalingrad. And it is there, and along the line, that they are stopped for the time being by Mikhail Shumilov's 64th Army and Vasily Chuikov's operational group, who defend the southern approach to Stalingrad. But something else is getting started this week, nearly 13,000 kilometers to the southeast. Today on the 7th, Operation Watchtower begins as the Allies invade Tulagi, Guadalcanal, Gavutu, and Tanambogo in the Solomon Islands. Now, on the 5th, Japanese Imperial Headquarters suggests that increased Allied radio activity might be a prelude to some sort of South Seas attack. Japanese 8th Fleet radio base has noticed this, and one of their staff officers will later say that he concluded it was Guadalcanal that was the target. Still, 8 months to the day after the Japanese achieved total surprise at Pearl Harbor, the Allies achieved total surprise in the South Seas. The expeditionary force that set sail last week made itself seem like a convoy heading for Australia for a whole week, but now on the 5th, south of Rennell Island swings due north for the final leg to Guadalcanal, and heavy rains and cloud cover stop Japanese recon from spotting the Armada. Last week, its commander, Frank Jack Fletcher, released his plans, which divided his 82 ships into Richmond Turner's amphibious force and an air support force under Lee Noyes. Noyes' force has 3 carrier groups with carriers Saratoga, Wasp, and Enterprise. Fletcher is aboard his flagship Saratoga. There are some 16,000 soldiers, most of them U.S. Marines of the 1st Marine Division. Their plan, issued already July 20th, has the division split in 2, a Guadalcanal group of 11,300 directly under Division Commander Alexander Vandegrift, which is 2 combat groups and a support group whose objective is the Lunga Point airfield, and a northern group of 3,000 soldiers under William Rupertus, who would hit Tulagi and Gavutu Tanambogo. Early today, as the carriers are left behind in the rear, the assault convoy splits, and the festivities begin with the bombardment of the Japanese coastal batteries at Lunga Point. 16 Wildcats from Wasp swoop down to destroy all 15 floating Japanese planes off Halavo. 0 hour for the landings of Guadalcanal Group is 9:10 a.m., and when it arrives, the 1st Battalion of the 5th Marine Regiment wades ashore on Beach Red. They make a beachhead 2 kilometers long and some 600 meters deep, together with the 3rd Battalion. They face no opposition, the bombardment having driven everyone away. But the Japanese construction gangs have no weapons anyhow. The 1st Marines cross a branch of the Tanaru River and reach the rainforest. And here, I will treat you to Richard Frank's description of the jungles of Guadalcanal. The lords of Guadalcanal's jungle were the great hardwood trees that soared up to 150 feet and had girths as much as 40 feet across. Their straight trunks sprouted only high branches that formed a sunroof roof. The eye could penetrate only a few feet into the foliage of the jungle floor, composed of varicolored plants, bushes, ferns, and at least 11 kinds of thorns. Marines exhausted themselves and dulled machete blades trying to chop a path through the tangle. Sheltered in the dark bramble were wild dogs, pigs, lizards, and gigantic bush rats the size of rabbits. Crocodiles slithered in and out of watercourses. Gaggles of mosquitoes dispensed malaria, dengue, and lesser fevers. Omnipresent rot made the yellow clay earth porous. Everywhere there was dampness. This day, the 1st Marines travel about 3 hours per mile. Not miles per hour, hours per mile. But they're not just moving at a snail's pace by land. There is a huge supply bottleneck at the beach. There are 300 Marine pioneers whose job is to unload the transport craft's supplies. But there is way more work to do than they can handle. There are only 5 battalions of Marines to take on whatever Japanese there are defending, though, so Van de Grift doesn't want to divert combat units for unloading duty. It is a real traffic jam, though the Japanese do stop the unloading for a few hours with an air raid. See, just by happenstance, the Japanese have a bunch of extra planes at Rabaul this morning for an attack against the Allied base at Milne Bay. Bettys, Zeros, both long and short range, Val dive bombers, Nakajima recon planes, and flying boats are all there. They are made ready for takeoff as soon as Rabaul gets word of today's attacks, which it does at 6:13 a.m. when the naval bombardment of Tulagi begins. And starting at 9:30 with the Bettys first, 53 Japanese planes fly for Guadalcanal. The Bettys and escorting Zeros arrive a 1:15, but the clouds mean that their bombs hit nothing. A big dogfight then follows between them and a bunch of wildcats, during which Japanese ace Saburo Sakai is wounded and makes an epic flight. And I'm only mentioning that so you can look it up. The Japanese dive bombers arrive around 3 in the afternoon and only manage 1 hit on anything, the destroyer Mugford, but that does kill 19 and wound 32 more. The first clash over Guadalcanal added proof, if any were needed, of the marked superiority of the Zero in a dogfight. But the main objective of the attacks, the disruption of the landing, was signally not achieved. 5 Bettys, 9 Vals, and 2 Zeros had been expended, with most of their crews in exchange for 1 non-fatal hit on a destroyer. One of Japan's greatest aces was out of the campaign on the first day. As for Tulagi, which is like 3 kilometers long and less than 1 wide, the Marines attacked Beach Blue on the south side of the island. Florida Island is just off the coast, so there are Marines there in reserve who land already at 7:40 in the morning. They set up at a promontory that overlooks Beach Blue and do not see any Japanese. At 8 a.m., Marine raiders ground their boats on the coral offshore of Tulagi and wade onto the island. They cross the beach and push straight on across the island, which is dominated by a ridge, then turn and sweep east across the island to Phase Line A, where they first meet resistance. They realize they are not going to overwhelm the enemy before nightfall, so they dig in. Gavutu and Tanambogo are about 3 kilometers east of Tulagi and are twin islands separated by a causeway, each island dominated by a hill. Coral reefs sabotage any approach except from the east, and the terrain funnels an attacker into a spot where he is easily hit by both sides. Troops land at noon, and they make progress in spite of determined enemy machine gun fire. And in the afternoon, they take Hill 148. That's the one that dominates Gavutu. That island is by no means secure, but a company of Marines from Florida Island still try to take Tanambogo, but this fails. The wounded are evacuated by night. And in North Africa, evacuation is just the opposite of what Winston Churchill is hoping for. He arrives in Cairo the 3rd. Theater Commander Claude Auchinleck insists he can beat the Axis here, but says he won't be ready to attack until mid-September at least. Well, with the Germans advancing into the Caucasus, and with Chief of Staff Brooke warning Churchill that if they become a threat to the Persian Gulf, then the British might have to abandon Egypt and Suez altogether and send everyone to the Gulf, because losing the Abadan and Bahrain oil fields would cost Britain like 20% of her war-making ability, Churchill feels haste to turn things around somehow. So he relieves Auchinleck of duty, first offering the job to Brooke, who declines, and then to Harold Alexander, with William Gott commanding 8th Army. On the 7th, today, though, Gott is killed in a plane crash. Bernard Montgomery will replace him. Auchinleck will be told all this tomorrow. Alexander will take over the 15th, Montgomery the 13th, and Auchinleck will go once more to India to be in charge there under Archie Wavell, who will become Viceroy. Also this week, on the 1st, the London Controlling Section under John Bevan submits to the War Cabinet a series of fake war plans designed to convince the Germans that an attack is coming somewhere else other than North Africa. There are 3 of them: Operation Solo in Norway, Operation Overthrow against France, and Operation Kennicott against southern Italy and Greece. See, since Allied forces have been fairly obviously training in Scotland for an amphibious assault, they want to sow doubt in the German minds as to where it shall be. And that is the week. A week of changes in the high commands in North Africa and Stalingrad, a week of advances into the Caucasus, a week of regrouping on the Don, and a day of attacks in the Solomon Islands that are the beginning of a far larger campaign. And something else here. In fact, I will end today with a rather long quote from Martin Gilbert's The Second World War. Here it is. Among the troops fighting alongside the Germans on the Eastern Front were volunteer units from France, Belgium, and Holland. On August 6th, the commander of the forces in which the Dutch unit was serving, General Kraus, wrote to Hermann Goering, "We have thousands of Dutchmen in transport regiments in the East. Last week, one such regiment was attacked. The Dutch took more than 1,000 prisoners and were awarded 25 Iron Crosses. That week, more than 1,000 Dutch Jews had been deported from Holland to Auschwitz, followed by 987 on August 7th, and 559 3 days later. Of these deportees, more than half were gassed on reaching the camp. The others were sent to the barracks at Birkenau to become slave laborers." It was on August 7th that Goering presided over a meeting to discuss the German 4-year plan for industrial production. Slave labor was to be an essential part of the plan. But as the notes of the discussion show, there were areas from which Jewish labor could no longer come. In White Russia, the meeting was told, only a few Jews are still alive. Over on our Time Ghost History channel, we've started a new series called Time Ghost Shorts and Short Shorts, which are just what they say, shorter coverage of historical events, a true whirlwind of excitement. You can check that out right here. And visit the Time Ghost Barracks to see our newest collectibles. Our patron of the week is Johnny Hui. Be like Johnny and join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com so I can continue making this series. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.